Hi, it's Dwyer. It's April 4th, 2025. Money1776.com. Also, always 1776.com. Nothing I say in this video should be construed as financial advice. I want everyone to do their own due diligence. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Let me continue the disclaimer. I'm not a disinterested party. I currently own some Google and some other stocks that I'm not going to mention here. I'm hoping to buy more of Google at these prices. I have a Substack blog on cryptocurrency, Dwyer70905.substack.com. I'm in Silicon Valley, and in my family law practice, I've represented Googlers, I've represented Meta employees, and other tech employees. Let me also point out, too, that in my own personal transactions, I have used Tether to park savings. In this video, I'll mention Ethereum. I own some Ethereum. I want viewers here to question everything. Everything I say, everything everyone says, right? In my opinion, one of the lessons of life is to trust no one as an adult. Now, in my opinion, the whole world is upside down. Right? People are uncertain about technology like Bitcoin, and so they are pricing it as a risk asset. Right? They're doing so as they're watching gold, a risk-off asset, jump to new highs. Right? People are a little bit confused because they don't seem to realize that the gold-silver ratio is skewed. So silver likely has more upside than gold does. Just understand that folks have no idea. And that's the theme here for this video. Folks have no idea that Bitcoin is also a limited supply asset. That Bitcoin has more portability than gold. That with QR codes, Bitcoin is easier to use as a method of payment than gold. They have no idea that with the Lightning Network, the transaction clears almost instantaneously. People are uncertain about technology like stablecoins. Didn't Terra blow up? Right? They'd rather invest in U.S. treasuries that are backed by the United States government. Right? These people have no idea that stable coins like Tether are backed by U.S. treasuries. Believe it or not, folks, Tether holds more U.S. treasuries than Canada, based on the latest available data. As of March 2025, that's last month, understand that Tether announced that it had purchased $33.1 billion, a net $33.1 billion in U.S. treasuries in 2024, making it the seventh largest buyer globally of U.S. treasuries. Let me just say that Canada's holdings of U.S. treasuries are lower. Right? They're at $29.7 billion as of December 2024. So I just want people to understand that markets only work with information. As the information gets out and people actually start to hear it and start to be able to understand it, then we'll reach a price equilibrium that accurately reflects supply and demand. Right, folks? We're not there because the technology is moving too fast. Right? You're hearing that Bitcoin is too risky at a time when Fidelity and BlackRock are flocking to Bitcoin. Right? At a time when the United States government is going to start maintaining a Bitcoin stockpile. My parents are no longer with us. If they were, my mom would stay 1,000 feet away from Bitcoin. Right? She wasn't programmed to accept digital assets. Understand, many people are not programmed to accept digital assets. If I said to most, who's our number one trading partner in terms of the value of the trade? Many people, after listening to the news, would think China. Right? You're hearing about China eating our lunch. You're hearing this and that about China. Right? By the way, China just upped its tariffs against the United States. Right? You have Trump making a move. You have China retaliating. Right, folks? The situation with China right now is bleak. But I need for folks to understand that the latest data shows that the United States conducts the most trade with Mexico. Right? Understand, in 2023, the total trade between the United States and Mexico reached $798.83 billion. Right? Number two, globally, is a country that we were silly enough to ask them if they wanted to be our 51st state. Right, folks? The level of arrogance of the United States at a time when we have a $36 trillion debt is baffling. Just understand that the second biggest trading partner that we have is Canada. It's not China. Understand, the Canadian trade totaled $773 billion. Right? You have to subtract almost $200 billion from that to get to the $575 billion in trade that we have going on right now with China. Now let me pause for a moment here, and I believe it's important. I have a vested interest in this part of the story. Just understand that whatever the local sentiment is in the United States, the world is diverse. And that diversity is underwriting our economy. Right? If our three biggest trading partners are Latino country Mexico, Canada, Asian country China, then what that means is that two of our three biggest trading partners are non-white countries. Right? So we're in some era here, and it'll pass, where DEI is frowned upon in the United States. If you want federal money, you can't have a diverse workforce. You can't consider things like, ethnic background, historical background. Folks, it's simply ridiculous. You need to understand that view does not reflect our reality. Well, let me continue here. So if you believe, as I do, and this is a pivot, that commercial real estate isn't coming back, folks, I'm just telling you, your employer might be roughing you up, saying, look, you need to be in the office 3 days a week. Just understand that too many people want to work from home. Right? If I'm hiring an assistant, I want a virtual assistant. I don't want to have to provide them with office space. I don't even want to have to provide them with computer technology. Right? There's a group of employers looking for people who have their own home office who want to work from home. This group is much bigger now than it was before COVID. Right? You have to think that at some point that's going to impact the demand for commercial office buildings. Let me also point out too that if I'm hiring workers, right, then maybe I need a space near downtown. Maybe I need, access to mass transit so people can come to the warehouse. Right? But understand that changes if I'm hiring or using robots. Right? Understand, they don't live outside of the warehouse. I can save money by having the warehouse just near a highway. Right? So that my delivery drivers can get to the warehouse, pick up stuff, leave. I don't have to take the extra step of saying, hey, I need to be close to where the workers live if I'm not using workers. So I believe commercial real estate, at a minimum, is going to continue to be flat to negative. Let's continue. If you believe, as I do, then you believe housing is going to collapse. Folks, it's actually deeper a value proposition than knowing that a house in some areas, in my area, costs on average 12 times the median income. Right? Younger people who understand the technology are asking themselves, do I want a mortgage that is 10 times my annual income? Or do I want Bitcoin, AI stocks, robotic stocks? They're asking themselves, which will be worth more in 10 years? I personally feel that that question answers itself. Right? As I make this video, Bitcoin is below $85,000. Right? If you believe, as I do, as Strategy does, as Metaplanet does, that we're just getting started in Bitcoin, then understand the situation that puts this generation, young people, straight out of college in. Right? They're going to watch members of their generation make boatloads of money off of things like Bitcoin, Ethereum. Let's go there. Ethereum below 2,000 as I make this video. Right? Ethereum has a huge upgrade that's going to vastly improve Ethereum's staking capability. That's on deck. Right? Understand, Bitcoin, Ethereum, they've been languishing the last month and a half. Right? You have a whole generation that's going to look at their compatriots, the people who don't have the $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 mortgage, and they're going to see them renting. We're going to have to figure out the relationship between the rental price and the price of ownership. They're going to be renting in some hot spots, near some clubs, near some good restaurants in town, unburdened by this huge mortgage. And they're going to be making money off of the digital asset revolution, the one that many people feel is fraudulent. Right? Peter Schiff. If you're a Peter Schiff devotee, for example, you're questioning Bitcoin. You think all of these altcoins are going to go to zero. The only thing that matters is the risk-off asset gold and some other precious metals. Right? What if the world doesn't go that way? What if it actually goes the Bitcoin way? What if the holders of Strategy right now are right? Right? That company is taking on debt to buy Bitcoin. They own a huge share of Bitcoin. Every dollar that Bitcoin goes up, Strategy jumps hundreds of thousands of dollars. Right? Well, let me just say, if I'm right that housing's in a bubble right now, think about what this generation's going to see. They're going to see what we saw in 2007. They're going to see a wave of foreclosures. Right now, we didn't have remotely the same level of debt in 2007 that we have per capita right now, thanks to the $36 trillion debt of the United States. Right? That has left us with a debt carrying cost that exceeds our defense budget on an annual basis. Right? So if people see a wave of foreclosures, folks, it's going to be years before housing bounces back. I'll just tell you that it takes a while to unring the bell. You see a wave of foreclosures and you think to yourself, wow, maybe housing isn't guaranteed to appreciate in value. Right? Understand too, you have companies like Tesla and Box that right now are coming up with, let's say, modern day modular homes, right? It's an update on the trailer concept. Just understand that if enough people go that route, there might be a group reevaluation of the value of a house, right? Housing's been extremely bullish since, I'll say by chance, we know it's not by chance, the United States left the gold standard. Right? Just understand that that might slow down considerably. So, let's think this through. And this is how you'll know the state of the world if this event happens. Right? If you believe, as I do, that commercial real estate and residential real estate tank, then it follows that many banks are just a few months away from imploding. Right, folks? Silicon Valley Bank, at a time when the Mag 7 was going strong, imploded during the Biden administration. Right? You shouldn't forget that. A lot of high net worth individuals had money in Silicon Valley Bank. Right? Understand, Silicon Valley Bank was in a hot part of the economy. Technology. And it imploded. You have banks that are heavily reliant on the real estate sector. Right, folks? If commercial real estate and residential real estate implode, if there's not a lot of money to be received off mortgages, some of these banks are going to implode. They swept Silicon Valley Bank's implosion under the rug, right? The Biden administration set something up where everyone gets paid. Folks, that can't happen every time a bank implodes because we can't afford it. The remedy is unsustainable. So when you start hearing that banks start imploding, don't make the mistake of thinking, oh, they just ran that bank into the ground. That bank must have had a few crooks cooking the books at the bank. Right? That bank must not have been operated properly. Right, folks? Understand, the problem might be systemic. That long-held societal assumptions were proven to be false. Right? That people are now seeing, dare I use the term, black swans when they thought there were only white swans. Right? So I'm telling you, I have friends who firmly believed that, houses only go one direction. Right? They have no idea that you could make more money. In fact, you could even live in a better neighborhood if you rented. Right? They have no idea. They had no idea about the risk involved in buying a house. Right? The opportunity costs involved. Look at Bitcoin's performance over the last 10 years. Right, folks? Your friend, unlimited budget, who decided, hey, I'm going to pass on a $500,000 mortgage because that would deprive me of the ability to invest in Bitcoin, to invest in Ethereum, to invest in more provocative coins, to stake. Right? I have no doubt some people watching this video right now are making passive income off masternodes. Right? Just go to allnodes.com and look at the coins that you can stake and look at the rate of returns. Right? Many of those rate of returns, by the way, are greater than the interest you would get on a 10-year treasury right now. Right? Understand that person 10 years ago who pivoted to Bitcoin and didn't buy that house is far ahead of the people who did. Understand, too, that housing's leveraged. Right? When I say buy a house, I'm being charitable. Many people didn't even put the 20% down to buy the house. Right? They financed the house. So understand, you put 20% down, you own a house, the house drops by 20%, you have no equity in the house. Understand the way a mortgage works too. You spend the first few years in a traditional mortgage, paying down interest, not principal. Right? So let me just say, I want people to just pay attention to banks. You'll know how well your area is doing or not doing by the local banks that announce that they're merging with some other bank. Right? That's a way for a bank to go out of business without saying, hey, we are going belly up. Right? You hear about bank mergers. You hear about banks disbanding. You hear about government coming in to bail out a bank. If that happens more than once where you live, just understand, that means your economy is on shaky ground. Let me also say, too, that we're here focused on the R word, right? Recession. Are we going to get a recession? Are we going to get a recession? Let me tell you what's been happening in just one sector. The restaurant sector of late. On the Border Mexican Grill and Cantina filed for bankruptcy, March 2025. Bar Louie filed for bankruptcy, March 2025. Hooters of America, where I used to watch boxing matches, by the way, filed for bankruptcy, March 31st, 2025. Now, understand, this is on top of some notable bankruptcies from last year. Red Lobster filed for bankruptcy, May of last year. TGI Fridays filed for bankruptcy, November of last year. Buca de Beppo filed for bankruptcy, August of last year. Rubio's Coastal Grill filed for bankruptcy, June of last year. Right, folks? Just recognize that markets don't move in full unison. Right? Some markets are in recession right now. I heard Applebee's is merging with IHOP, right? That's how they sell it, right? What that means is that they need to cut costs. What that means is they need economies of scale, right? They're bandying together because alone it's been too tough. So I just need for folks to understand that there are no quick fixes. This media narrative where, you're hearing, oh, these tariffs, they're just short term. If countries behave the way we want, then we'll be back in the saddle in no time. Right? The President of the United States, said, this economy is going to boom again. It's going to be great. Right, folks? I need for people to understand that Donald Trump, in his own background, has had some bankruptcies. Right? Businesses he's operated have gone under. There's a famous story of Donald Trump walking down the street. He's with a prior wife. He sees a homeless man, and he thought to himself, and we got the story from Trump himself, he thought to himself, that guy might be wealthier than I am. Right? This was when he was having problems back in the 80s. Don't have blind faith in anybody. Right? I'm a fan of Scott Bessent's, the Treasury Secretary. Right? Big step up. I mean big. From Janet Yellen, who at one time was trying to convince us there'd never be another recession. Right? I don't expect that level of BS from Scott Bessent. But understand, even the people who know economics are handicapped by the need to prevent runs on the bank. What's Bessent going to say? Your bank sucks? It's at risk of a run? That's not going to help your local economy. So they have to be moderated. They can't tell you what's obvious, what's literally happening right before your eyes. Right? That Hooters has gone bankrupt after Bar Louie has gone bankrupt. Right? They can't tell you that Rubio's going bankrupt is just one of a string of bankruptcies. Let me add too. A few years ago, there was all this hype about Airbnbs. Right? It even hit my family. My partner at the time loved Airbnbs. Now, I'm somebody who prefers hotels. Right? When I'm in Vegas, I want to be at a hotel complex. Right? I want to be in room 3-305 or whatever. I want to be able to pick up the phone. And I want to be able to order room service. I want to be able to pick up the phone and say, hey, can you have someone come up here and refresh the towels? Right? I want to get in that party vibe where, I walk out of my hotel room and there are other tourists on the floor, right? You go to the hotel bar, you might see some other tourists who you've run into at different parts of the hotel, maybe the sports book. And you're laughing, having drinks, you're making friends, right? That's a vacation for me. I don't want to be in somebody else's home where I can't pick up the phone and call room service or ask for the bed refresh or whatever, right? Where, the only tourists in town are me and I'm walking outside and the neighbors are looking at me funny because I don't live there. I feel like an outsider. I'm not in some party zone. So I was a little bit, from the demand side, I was a little bit skeptical on the whole Airbnb concept. Right? People were going out and buying a lot of Airbnbs. Folks, understand Airbnb right now is in a recession. Right? The people like me are starting to think to themselves, hey man, I don't want to be someplace where the owner is evaluating me as a guest, where I actually have to clean up the place before I leave, right? Understand, you could be a very shrewd Airbnb operator, right? Unfortunately, the same way a rising tide lifts all boats, a dropping tide lowers all boats. Your well-run Airbnb is going to find people who are saying, hey man, I don't want to pay that price. I don't want that experience. Right? You even have the neighbors revolting in many places. Right? They're saying, hey man, we're tired of strangers being on our block. I have kids. Right? The loud music, the people who, are showing up, smoking and stuff like that. We don't want that in our neighborhood. So some towns are cutting back on the ability to have Airbnbs. This vibrant sector of the economy. Now we're finding out that road has bumps. That road has ditches. Right? And of course you have the hospitality sector, hotels, saying in a self-interested way, we don't want the competition. Right? Understand, folks, the future is always uncertain. You think you've stumbled on a gold mine. And then you find out that it's not holding the goal you thought. Right? You can imagine that if you go into a bank today and you say, hey, I need a loan so I can buy this third house. And they say, wow, why do you need a third house? And you say, oh, I'm going to open up an Airbnb. Folks, the bank would be hesitant to give you the real estate loan for your own house these days. It's a different world in 2025. Be aware of that. Right? The old rules don't apply these days. The world is changing that fast. So to sum up, half an hour in, I expect gold, I expect silver, I expect Bitcoin, and yes, I expect Ethereum to go on runs, as well as some other cryptos. Right? I expect them to go on runs. I expect Google to go on a run. Right? Google's PE is down around 20 right now, folks. Lowest it's been in some time. Right? But understand, I'm expecting commercial banks to have problems. I'm expecting commercial real estate to have problems. Right? I'm expecting residential real estate to have problems. That unwind is going to lead to a lot of disruptions. The canary in the coal mine are going to be your local banks. If they start going under, and if you see bank consolidation, then it doesn't matter what politician is trying to assure you that the economy is on good footing. You'll know that it's not. Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours. Please don't be bashful. I know there are always some bulls out there. There are always some bears out there. There's always some entrepreneurial types out there who see an opportunity and who see a part of the economy that's growing. Let me point out that there's always a part of the economy that's growing, that it's not a stock market, it's a market of stocks. I'll agree with that. Right? Tell us your views in the comment section of this YouTube video. In my mind, I have little doubt that commercial real estate is going to be flat to negative, that residential real estate is going to pop. Just look at the housing prices in places like Colorado. Right, folks? The minute you're in an area and you're thinking to yourself, wow, folks are supposed to pay 8 times their mortgage and up for the local house, that doesn't fly at a time of innovation like we're having right now. You need to separate out the innovation that's happening from the stock market, right? We have groundbreaking innovation. What we're going to learn is that the manufacturing sector, even with tariffs, is never going to come back to the United States like it once was, because robotics and AI are going to lower the amount of people needed to do the manufacturing, right? There'll be a factory in your town. Many of the workers there, as is the case right now at Amazon warehouses, many of the workers there are going to be robots. Those are my thoughts. I look forward to yours in the comment section of this YouTube video. Thanks for stopping by.